I think it's a bit theatrical. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he does it because, he's infamous for making rash and grandiose decisions on one hand. On the other hand, I mean, once again, it's not as simple as that. What if he leaves the talks? What happens between the US and Russia? What happens to their bilateral relationship in such a case? I mean, will the sanctions hold? Because, if he leaves the peace talks, the war continues, and he carries on negotiating with Russia, he pretty much becomes Russia's ally, which changes things globally. But at the same time, if that happens, there's always China, there's Europe, there's the global South. So, it's a situation filled with uncertainty, but once again, chaos is better than a stalemate.
All doing well. Let's now get the take of Igor Novikov, who was a former senior advisor to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky and who oversaw US-Ukrainian relations. Igor, welcome to the program. Good to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, and happy Easter.
And the very same to you.
Everyone who got Easter today. So.
Yeah, indeed. What is the mood in the Ukrainian camp, so to speak, this Easter Sunday morning? How are people doing?
It's the usual mood. I mean, it's not much different from what we've been seeing over the last at least year. I would say 3 years. People are at war. There are two sides to it. Obviously, people got used to this war, so life goes on in a sense. But at the same time, everyone is still in mortal danger, and the only difference over the last I would say not even less than 24 hours is the fact that there aren't any drones and missile strikes.
Before he became elected president of America for the second time, did you think, Igor, that Donald Trump might be useful to the process of solving things, or did you think he was always going to be a threat?
Well, it's not as simple as that. Obviously, there are certain advantages to having President Trump in the Oval Office. He got things moving in the sense that this war was kind of at a point where any change would have been welcome on one hand. On the other hand, obviously, this kind of somewhat infantile approach to solving problems is actually causing problems. If you look at truce, this, proverbial Easter truce that we're in right now, although I would disagree that it's probably not a truce, more like the lack of long-range airstrikes from both sides. It's very Trump-esque in its nature. So it's got a very loud and very clickbait title, but at the same time, there's emptiness underneath it.
And this talk of, if things don't happen sooner, we'll just take a pass and let them at it. How do you feel about that comment by President Trump in the recent days?
Well, I think it's a bit theatrical. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he does it because, he's infamous for making rash and grandiose decisions on one hand. On the other hand, I mean, once again, it's not as simple as that. What if he leaves the talks? What happens between the US and Russia? What happens to their bilateral relationship in such a case? I mean, will the sanctions hold? Because, if he leaves the peace talks, the war continues, and he carries on negotiating with Russia, he pretty much becomes Russia's ally, which changes things globally. But at the same time, if that happens, there's always China, there's Europe, there's the global South. So, it's a situation filled with uncertainty, but once again, chaos is better than a stalemate.
And what about a deal? There's talk of a fair deal. What is the lay of the land as you see it now?
Which deal do you mean? Do you mean the minerals deal?
The minerals deal, exactly.
Well, the memorandum has been signed. I think we're quite far away from reaching the actual deal, with some practical things in it. It's more of a statement of intent at the moment from both parties. But once again, I think the ceasefire process and the negotiations about what happens with the war take precedent here because, even if that deal is concluded, there's no way to guarantee that Putin will stop firing. And it's a question of what Trump does next. And from what we've seen so far, not much.
There was some class of comment over the weekend that his administration might accept Putin's annexation of Crimea as part of an overall deal. Are these rumors, or do they have credence? Do they worry you?
Well, they do worry me because, I mean, if that happens, we're pretty much inviting every authoritarian, warmongering nation to actually annex other countries' land, and in the hope of having it recognized by somebody like President Trump at some point, which will not help the global stability. But once again, what President Trump thinks, what President Putin think, it's only in their heads. So, there's no way to guess it, and no rumors are going to help here. We're just going to have to wait and see.
When you saw the awful attack on Palm Sunday last week, and you just think, how in God's name can an act of peace come out of such a violent offerings on a day like that? Is there any sense that, particularly among the people on the street in Ukraine, that we can nudge towards a deal of some sort to end this war, or is there a sense of utter despondence? What's the mood on the street, as it were?
Well, I'd be lying if I said that people would like the war to continue, and I think that's true for any sane human being, not only for the Ukrainian people here, but I think even some parts of the Russian population might want this war to end. But once again, there's a difference between a ceasefire and the end to this war. At the moment, everyone is focusing more on preventing civilian casualties, on trying to do anything in their power to make sure that, such atrocities never happen again, but they will, unfortunately, whilst Putin is still alive.
And the state of affairs with Europe and the relationship between Europe and Ukraine, and the kind of isolationist, if you will, approach of the Americans, or at least they're cozying up to Russia. Where does Ukraine stand in the fight ahead, in fighting not so much alone, but certainly without the might and the strength of the American backing?
Well, once again, everyone sees this situation as a black and white situation. So we kind of will win if we have America on our side, and we lose if we don't have America on our side. Both statements are somewhat true, but not entirely true. I think it's more of Europe is in a better position here to kind of to make that decision what happens next. But I think Ukraine and Europe are in this together, because if Putin gets to destroy Ukraine, Europe is next. There's no question about it whatsoever. And I think we're over-dramatizing kind of the potential American pullout, because if that happens, that means we reshape the global order. And, then it's a question of what happens between Europe and China. Then it's a question between Europe and Ukraine in terms of European involvement in trying to protect its borders. Is what happens with the global south. So I think, it will definitely reshape, the world map for, generations to come. But the American pullout is not a disaster everyone is kind of trying to paint it to be.
All right, Igor, thank you for your time today. Wish you well. As you say, happy Easter. Igor Novikov joining us there today for his take on what's happening over the weekend in Ukraine.